So I was pretty useless at every sport I tried, apart from wheelchair racing. And it took a few years for me to kind of, or for anyone to recognise that I was good. But with your sports, was it just natural that you went into rowing? And I'm going to start with you, John, because when we read your little citation there, it talks about being a psychologist and a PhD and a professor. MBA is a pretty big deal, isn't it?
It is in other countries. I'm not sure. Sometimes they say that and they think it's like a slightly lamer form of a master's in business education or something. So, I started very late. I started at the age of 17. It was the first time I picked up a basketball. I lived in Stockport, grew up in Stockport. I was a fat kid who liked reading books and eating Greg's steak slices, right? That's
Don't we all?
Right, that's it. That was me.
You mean you stopped?
Well, I have not stopped. The only thing that is true about me now is that I'm getting wider and shorter in old age. That's it. But I didn't play sport for the same reasons that many people do. I wasn't ever enthralled by sport. I have never once experienced a runner's high. Never once. All those people are like, oh yeah, endorphins. Never once. So I walked into a gym in Stockport, a really crappy gym in Stockport, and a bunch of kids looked at me like no one had ever looked at me before. They looked at me and it was the first time strangers affirmed my potential. It was amazing. They ran towards me and they're like, he's on our team. And I think you can all imagine how that feels, this idea that you walk down the street and people think you're a monster. Then you walk into this room and all of a sudden people think that you have potential. I told them after 45 minutes of a practice and missing my first shot by 6 feet, I told them I was going to play in the NBA. And they said, yeah, of course you are. And they helped me. And that's what got me into the sport. It was never, I didn't know that you got paid to play basketball. I was relieved to find out you did. And I didn't know the kind of cultural part of it in America either. I just thought, if I go to America, at least it'll be sunny. And so...
That's good. So I started playing basketball before I need some coaching tips from you. I now play a bit of basketball, except I play on a boys' junior team where the average age is 12. And one of the boys recently asked me how old I was and then said, I think my grandmother's that old. No, it got worse. At the end of the first quarter, the captain got taken to one side and told he had to pass me the ball at some point. And then at the end of the first half, the referee started coaching me. That's really bad.
I don't know if that's lovely or quite sad.
No, it's awful, isn't it? Anyway, so Steve, was rowing just always, the thing? We get it because you're tall and people kind of look at you in different ways. Was rowing the thing that you were always drawn to, or were you pushed to it? Was your family sporty?
I certainly wasn't pushed. When I went to secondary school, I still live in Marlow in Buckinghamshire, where I was born and bred. Of Jack, my father wasn't in submarines. He was on top of the water. He was in the Merchant Navy. If he went underneath, I think that would have shocked him completely. But he was from the Marlow area as well. And I've got two elder sisters. One 5 years older than me, the other one's 9 years older than me, and we all went to the same secondary school, small comprehensive school in Marlow. And the head of the English department loved two sports. One was rugby and the other was rowing. Great Marlow School didn't do either of those sports, but he became captain of Marlow Rowing Club. And he always talks about that as the new intake of students came into the secondary school, he would look at the size of their hands and feet. And if they had big hands and feet, then he would then go to them and ask them if they wanted to try rowing. I'm heavily dyslexic. It really struggled educational-wise at school. And so I used to love sport. I was quite an explosive sport. I was quite a good sprinter. Before I got into rowing, which isn't about sprinting at all, it's the complete opposite. And he just sort of asked a few individuals if they wanted to give it a go. And I worked out very quickly. So I think being dyslexic doesn't mean you're not bright. And I worked out that if you've got do rowing, we are not like Eton that have an international Olympic rowing course in your back garden. We had to go down to the river, so you had to leave school to go and do the sport. And so that's where I was in. There was 12 of us from our year group that he asked. Within 3 weeks, that 12 came down to 4 because nobody else was interested in doing it. And I fell in love with it immediately, and sort of things moved on from there relatively quickly. I was 14 when I started, so a little bit younger than you, John.
So when did you both realise that not just that you were good, but that you could both be brilliant? Steve?
With the background of the private schools that Jack spoke about, is that in our first year, 1976, as 14-year-olds, we raced 7 times in a coxed 4, and we won all 7. We thought we were the God's gift of rowing. It wasn't until probably about 20 years later of looking back on the sort of humble beginnings, is your Eatons, your Radleys, your Shrewsburys have a first 8. They'll probably have a second 8. Eton will have a third 8 even before they break down into smaller boats. And so that we were never racing our peers or the top athletes in our year group, because they were all put into doing 8s, because that's what you do within the sport. We couldn't find 8 people to row, so we did 4s. But what that led us to do is that because we won 7 in 7, the next year at Junior 15 we entered 15 and we only won 8. That's because we thought we were the God's gift of rowing, so we didn't train as hard through the winter. And there's a saying in rowing, if you don't, you depend on how much training you do in the winter, it depends how fast you go in the summer. And there's a lot of truth in that. And so we hid round the corner a few times and didn't quite train as hard as we should do, but lost a few races and lost races to the kids that we were beating the year before. That then, a lesson learned, we motivated, so our next year, Junior 16s, we won everything in our age category and was very competitive in the juniors, where you're racing 1 and 2 years older boys within your category. And that's where people at Marlow Rowing Club, we had 3 coaches that also coached internationally. They didn't coach us, but they were away with the national team, and 1 athlete that was a lightweight world champion. And they were saying to me, you've got the capability of being a world champion. And you're thinking, oh, world champion, that sounds nice. Why not Olympic champion? And so from the age of 15, 16, I started focusing on that I wanted to be Olympic champion. By that time, my father had left the Merchant Navy, done a few other jobs, but set up his own company, a building company. So I was brought up on building sites, annoying builders of jumping off the scaffolding into their building sand, which they didn't really like very much. So I knew the building industry very well, but because of coming from a working class background almost into a middle class background, my 2 sisters had a much tougher upbringing than I did, is that my parents saw that there was a talent because of the results that we were getting and wanted to support me through. So I worked with my father on the building sites. He used to call me the foreman because I used to go training in the morning, turn up, have my hands in my pockets, watch him do the work, we'd stop, have lunch, and then mid-afternoon I would say, sorry Dad, I've got to go training again now. And sometimes I actually did go back training, quite often I didn't. And so it was that sort of humble beginning. So if you got a trophy with your name engraved on it, I thought that my name was engraved on the Olympic trophy at some stage, but I just didn't know when. And it took a long time to realise, even if you have a talent for something, you've got to get the best out of that talent to be able to get the best awards within that. And that's the whole learning process as you go through the process.
I mean, I want to talk about brave decisions that you've taken, but John, you know, we had a debate, and we've had a debate over the years about what's bravery. So I get a lot of flack, oh, you're really brave. What? Because I'm Welsh. So people, that could be true, but people make assumptions about me because I'm in a chair. You made some big decisions at quite a young age. So, you know, yeah, you said, you know, you want to play in the NBA. You know, that's not possible to do really from this country, is it? Tell us about how you make that step.
Yeah, nobody had done it. And even now there aren't very many British people who make it. I think at a very early stage, on that first day, I said I was going to play in the NBA, and then I oriented myself towards that and had really good teammates who made my very iterative progress feel like it was meaningful. But then there was a point when I realized I had to make a move, because England was not a place with the facilities and the coaching to get where I wanted to go. So I decided I was going to go to America. I didn't know how to do this, but thank you. I had a really good mum who helped me. I told her that I was going to play in America while she was lying down after work. She was a GP, and it was dark in the room, and she was listening to the Archers, for those of you of a certain age. And I told her, I don't know where I'm going to go to university. And she said, well, there's lots of choices. There's Manchester, there's Leeds, there's even London. That felt like a long way away back then. And I said, well, I don't know what country I want to go to university in. And she rolled over and clicked the Archers off. I realized I got her attention. And I said, I'm going to go to play in America, but don't worry, I'll become rich and buy you a house. The sweetener, right?
So how old were you?
I was 18. 18. I'd been playing for a year. I was still bad. But I thought I was rare, because I hadn't met a huge number of 6'9" people in Stockport. And although I knew there was more in basketball, there weren't tons. So I went to London. I found this place, the Fulbright Commission, that sold books full of high school names, and I went through. I initially thought I was going to write to them all. I didn't quite realize the scale of America, and instead I put a pin in pages and wrote to them. I wrote 3,000 letters. This is the era before email. I wrote 3,000 letters that essentially said, "Dear insert coach name, my name's John Amaechi. I am 6'9" and black and British. Can I play for your team?" 3,000 letters. I sent them all off. Very stupidly, I had a stamped addressed envelope in return. I licked a stamp and put it on a thingy. I didn't even realize America. I was a very stupid child, apparently. And I got 3 replies. 2 of them were no. One of them was a very rude no, from a coach that wrote a letter that said, and I never understand, it's telling about leaders, I think, when they take the time to tell you stuff that they don't have to tell you, that they shouldn't tell you. We're the winningest, I'd never heard that word before, I don't think it's a word. We're the winningest team in New Jersey. We don't need foreign talent. It's like, that's a lot of effort to go to. He had no context of the 3,000 letters, right?
So I didn't know that. Have you ever seen him in real life since that? I'd have gone to visit him and just gone.
We have met. I've played against, in the league, in the NBA, I played against his son. There may or may not have been a hard foul.
So back to my brilliant basketball career. My career stopped because I got fouled off for fighting. I was 13.
You know what?
Right.
That is the least surprising thing you could have said.
But so I had a row with the referee because he said I punched somebody, and my argument was
she did.
I slapped him. So anyway,
I love this. The argument wasn't that you didn't fight. It was a slap, not a punch.
Not a punch, yeah.
Okay.
So
good,
anyway,
good.
hard foul. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. So that was the plan. I ended up in Toledo, Ohio. I don't know if any of you know Toledo, Ohio. It is not the cultural epicenter of America, but it is a wonderful place. And
Was it warm and sunny?
This is the thing. I arrived in the summertime. It was the hottest place I'd ever experienced. I stayed through the winter. It was the coldest place I'd ever experienced. And what you don't realize, because you think you know that America's like Britain, increasingly, maybe in a bad way, but back then I thought it was just the same. But I arrived, and this wonderful gentleman, my coach, with a very calloused hand, reached out and shook my hand after I got off this tiny plane in Toledo. And he started talking, and I was like, oh my God, they don't speak English. And he had this what is a wonderful Midwestern accent that I couldn't understand. The first week was just context, just nodding and looking for smiles. And when people, then I would smile. And then if somebody gestured at something, I would eat it. And, you can get yourself into trouble that way, but...
How long were you there before they gave you grits?
Oh, it was early on, but let me tell you, just never criticize. If somebody's making them for you fresh, never criticize someone's grits. So I've eaten a lot of it. It's not my favorite thing, but...
So both your careers, you know, there's obviously ups and downs. Most of the time you talk about the ups and, you know, the winning and the cheerful stuff. But how have you both sort of picked yourself up when times are hard? You know, what is it that's made you come back?
I want to answer the same question as John's just answered.
No, go on,
is about the big decision, because for me it was relatively simple. I could see a path through, but as a sport we were just doing the same things over and over again, and we were getting better at getting bad. So there was one point, these coaches that said I could be good, you start believing it, you move in a certain direction, you follow the system, you follow what the coaches tell you, and you've got to rely that system is going to then deliver. We're talking about of early 80s, where British sport was not in a very good place at all, and that we weren't winning very many Olympic gold medals, we weren't doing very well in many other sports. And I actually turned it around and went and looked at businesses and looked at how business structured themselves, and realised that as a good athlete coming through, I was doing it very amateurish. East Germany was the country that was dominating our sport at that time, through the 60s, 70s and for most of the 80s as well. And they were full-time professionals and we were all part-time. And so in 1984, or the build-up to the end of 1983, is that the performance director of our sport said, "You're going to do what I tell you to do." I said, "Well, what we're doing is just not working. We've got to do something different." And so I dropped myself from the national team, decided I'd go and do under-23s. Under-23s now is a very important stepping stone in our sport. But back at the early 80s, it wasn't. If you went to the under-23s, you're never going to make the national team. And so I wanted to make a step back. Through my coach at the time, a guy called Mike Spracklin, sort of path away for me to be able to come back in. But we had to do something different. So my big decision and my radical change was rebelling against the Amateur Rowing Association. Very apt name for them. They're called British Rowing now, and they do pretty good stuff. But then it was very amateur, and then people would say to me, "Look, why did you make that decision? Why did you stick your neck out?" To me, that we had to make a change. I could have got it wrong. We could have got worse results or stayed at the same, but at least I went out to try and do something different. Fortunately for me, within 9 months from being eliminated at the World Championships in 83 to be Olympic champion 9 months later, in Sydney, and then once you find a path that gets you success, then you put even more vigour in it, and eventually the rest of the British team, coaches, administration followed the path as well.
And a lot of the stuff I guess we get asked to do when we're speakers is, you know, what can you learn from sport about hard work and talent and perseverance and resilience and all those things. John, your role now in terms of being an organisational psychologist and, you know, working in businesses, do you use, you know, everything from, or, you know, some of the stuff from your MBA career in terms of actually, I mean, there's lots of really good stories, if nothing else, in terms of that make it identical. You can connect to people, can't you?
Yes. Yeah, storytelling is how human beings have passed on important information since we crushed berries and painted on cave walls, right? So there is something...
Rowers still do that.
See? I wasn't going to say anything about them being Neanderthals, but it is one of those things, right? It's so fundamental that it's actually part of our psyches, that storytelling has a deeply profound impact. So I'm a nerd. I think that science and evidence matter. I think a lot of what happens in workplaces is conjecture. Oh, let's try this. This will solve the problem. Is there any evidence of that? None. But we're willing to spend some money to do this. And I think a theory of change is important, but I also know that for many of you, it isn't quite as exciting to go through the research and the science as it is for me. So what you do is you use the stories of your achievement of, you asked before about success, about the lumpiness of success, which is a great lesson you can learn from sport. If your success in sport is not lumpy, you probably haven't aimed high enough. One of the things that I used to run basketball camps in the summer, and kids used to always ask me, have you ever been dunked on? A dunk is, it is an embarrassing thing to happen to you. It's when somebody throws the ball through the hoop and you're underneath. It's supposed to be emasculating. I've never really got it. And I'm like, yes, of course I've been dunked on. I'm like, have you been dunked on? Like, no, never. And I said, well, you're not playing at a high enough level then. Because if you're doing something with aplomb and there's never a sense of peril, your ambition is in the wrong place. So the lumpiness of success is, I don't always believe that you learn a lesson always. Sometimes it can inform you a little bit. Sometimes it's just something to teach you something about your character. But the lumpiness tells you that your ambition is about right. Because there are moments of peril, moments of jeopardy, followed by moments of success, even if they are momentary.
It's taking risks, isn't it? Because, from the very beginning of my career to the very end, I lost more races than I won. But that's not put up next to my picture with the dodgy haircut. It's all about the victories and the wins. It's not about the hard times. And if you ask me what I mostly wanted, my husband was a wheelchair racer as well. I should say we've got quite a dark sense of humour, myself and my husband. Two things. So he broke his back when he was 21, and if he hadn't have done that, he wouldn't have met me. So obviously, that's good. That is quite dark, isn't it? But he was good. He was top 10 in the world. But mostly what I wanted to do was beat him. So every day I went out training was about thinking about, can I beat him? And I never did. I came close twice, but I never. So I'd swap at least a couple of my medals to have absolutely fair and square beaten him in a race. Definitely. We'd probably be divorced now, but But there is that bit. Do you think that your experience of kind of sport has, because you have to take risks, you have to leave it all on, and the public, bless them, the public have very interesting opinions. So I completely screwed up my 800 metres in Athens, which is my strongest event, for a week. Between that and coming second to Matt Pinson's on, what was it?
You told me the other day, the weakest link.
Weakest link, yeah, people would stop me in the street and go, you were rubbish on the weakest link. Yeah, I know, I'm saying, Matt Pinson's really good, isn't he? Yeah, he is. Sorry, I'm just going off. I was trying to raise money for a baby scanner. Matt Pinson didn't share the money with me. 23 grand.
Where did he put his money towards?
I can't remember.
When you go to Eton and Oxford, it may be a very different way the way that we've been brought up.
Yeah, anyway, I just... But I had people for weeks after me saying, oh, you didn't win on the weakest link. Have you thought about those poor babies that might die now?
Wow.
Yeah, harsh. Have you ever had that?
No.
Not quite that bad, but
you must have
close.
had it from when, if you ever see me in a boat again, shoot me.
Oh, there's hardly a day that goes past that I don't hear that. Not quite so often in the last 5 years, but that was nearly 40 years ago when I said that.
That was what did Anne, your wife, say?
She was the one that wanted to shoot me. And she's threatened a number of times that she wanted me to stop. My wife was an international rower as well. She was 5th at the 84 Olympics, silver and bronze medalist at the Commonwealth Games, and then became the team doctor in 1990 as a volunteer, and was a volunteer right the way through to 2008. In 2009 they started paying her for the role, and she's still doing the role now. So she's carrying on for another 2 years to go back to LA. So she sees it to LA, and she's going to retire. But after Atlanta, she wanted me to retire. We had 2 children at that time, and she wanted a normal life. What's a normal life? Certainly in retirement, my life has been more random than when I was an athlete. It was all planned and structured when you're an athlete, and changes when you're in the real world. But yeah, no, it is pretty difficult from that sort of process. Not quite as bad as the of children, babies dying from your situation. But coming back from Sydney, I opened a boat club. 2 schools very close to each other. I won't mention their names. But I was there. I was being pulled all over the country and the world at that time. Just coming back from Sydney the year after. And Anne opened the girls' side of the boathouse, and I opened the boys. And then I went into the area between the club and the water, and I signed everybody's autographs. I was there for 3 hours of all the kids coming up and signing autographs. I got a letter 4 or 5 days later and saying, my son thought that you were his hero and that you didn't speak to him. And I spent so much time on each individual child trying to engage, because he was quite shy. I'm quite shy as well. He didn't ask me any direct question. If he had, I probably would have answered it. But I didn't leave until everybody had got their autograph or their photograph. And mobile phones were only just coming into existence at that time, so it's not quite the same now. People wanted ink on a piece of paper, even if it's a little a square ripped out from a book from somebody else's page. That was the thing that they wanted at the time. And it doesn't matter how many good things happen to you, you always remember the sort of the awkward times and the things like that. They always stick in my mind.
So that's really, so best times in and out of sport. So I remember when I had my daughter, who's now 24, a bit scary, a journalist saying to me...
And just run the London Marathon.
3:29, good girl. Thank you for that, thank you for that. I offered her some coaching advice, and she said to me, Mum, you've never run a marathon. I have done 90 of them. If you've never run a marathon, you can't tell me what to do. She's my child. Anyway, best moment. So yeah, when Karis was born, a journalist rang me and said, which is more important, your child or your gold medals? Oh, my gold medal. Really, really stupid questions. So if you had to pick a good moment from your sporting career and your non-sporting career, what would you pick? Who's going first?
Good moment for me. I always wanted to be a single sculler. I found out that I was a better team player than I was an individual. It took me a long time to work that one out, but I kept going back to single sculling. But I did win the Commonwealth Games in '86 in Edinburgh. We were actually at Strathclyde, but that's the boat though, and that's the best result I got in the single. That was the last race that I ever did in the single. I had raced a month before at Henley Royal Regatta and got beaten by a lightweight in the final, which was disgracing for a heavyweight to be able to do that. But again, you learn lessons from that. That lightweight was reigning lightweight world champion, and of not putting your research into the people you're racing is that I knew that he was good lightweight, but he shouldn't be able to touch an open weight athlete. I went off in the first minute. I got a boat length's lead at Henley, where there's only 2 lanes and you're going backwards. If you can make a bigger gap, it's really hard for the person behind to come back. And so I pushed on harder than I should have done, got to a marker called the barrier, and I was 3 lengths up thinking the race is done and dusted. There's still another 7 minutes of racing to go. And this guy just ground me down and eventually came past me, rode me to a standstill. And the lesson I learnt there was never underestimate your opposition. Work out what their strengths and weaknesses are. If I knew that the way that he rode races, I would have raced in a different situation. So in rowing, that was bad. A month later, the best result I had in a single scull. And I'm still reigning Commonwealth champion, because rowing hasn't been back in the Commonwealth Games since.
Yay! That's a good record to have. John, if you had to pick a moment from your sport career, and if you want from your non-sport career.
So from my sports career, there were lots of cool moments. The first time I got on an NBA court and they do the introductions and it's very hyperbolic, and John, and your name lasts about 60 seconds as they say it. And my name was written on the floor in laser. And I remember as I ran on the court, I was like, and it was that moment when it struck me, oh, that thing that I said I'd do. By the way, I started I picked up a ball at the age of 17. That moment with the laser lights was 6 years later. And I was like, oh, I've done it. I'm here. And then I had to play a game, so I had to get serious. And so I think that was an amazing moment. But to be honest, the biggest thing about playing, the thing that I loved the most was the idea that my words were worth more all of a sudden. When I wanted to influence, when I wanted to say something, when I wanted people to think about something different, regardless of the fact that athletes aren't necessarily renowned for their intellect in kind of common parlance, people listened. I had a column in the newspaper in Orlando when I played there, and it was not a sports column. I had a current affairs and what's going on in the world and what you should be thinking about column while I was studying for my doctorate while I played.
I love you kind of skip over that, because you kind of skipped over university a bit. Where did you go?
I went to Penn State
Yeah.
and then to University of San Diego for grad school. Yeah.
That's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of downtime when you're a professional athlete. So there's time to write papers and read books and things like that.
Not in our sports. There's
No,
not that much
of course
downtime.
not. Of course not. Only in basketball.
Can
there's
I
a huge
say,
amount
I
of downtime.
currently write a column every week for the Middlesbrough Gazette.
I am bested.
I am not sure how many people read it, but it's 450 words every Wednesday. Anyway, have a
I'm
look.
now going to. This is excellent.
Next week's column is going to be about this.
If they have a comments page, I am.
Don't.
I am all over that.
So what I'm going to ask you next, I love this. So if I Googled, what is John Amaechi's word worth,
There is an answer.
what would I find?
There is an answer, and that answer is $17 million. That is the answer to that question. And it's because I turned down a $17 million contract from the LA Lakers to stay with the Orlando Magic. And it wasn't about loyalty, because I don't believe in loyalty. I think it's wonderfully transactional. The idea that if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. But I do believe in principles. They're far more enduring. And so I had been given an opportunity by an Orlando team. It was the only team in the NBA that was willing to give me a contract. And a coach in Doc Rivers, who has he's one of the people who's said lovely things about my newest book. So we're still in touch. They did me a solid, and I am principled, and to me that meant I stay with this team, regardless of the fact that I knew I would probably get dumped at the end of the year, which is exactly what happened. I ended up in Utah from Orlando, which is a bit of a culture shock. But it's been one of those enduring things for me, because now my life now is talking to people about really serious, difficult problems, the kind of things you have to sign an NDA for, and that people feel embarrassed at times to talk about their vulnerabilities and their worries and concerns and anxieties in a workplace environment. And people ask me regularly, can you be trusted? What's your word worth? And I tell them this story and tell them about $17 million. And to most people, that is assuring.
Yeah. I was never offered a $17 million contract, were you?
But the nearest I came to that was that the daytime quiz. It doesn't run anymore. It was called the 100%, and there were 100 questions, and it comes down to a final 3. And this question came up, and I happened to be watching it this day. And the question came up: is which British athlete has earned the most amount of money? It was Lennox Lewis, David Beckham, and Steve Redgrave. And I thought, what an honour that I've been put into that category. And the 3 finalists, each of them went for a different person. What a plonker that went for me in a sport that's got no money in at all.
Yeah.
No prize money, no appearance money. That was the closest I've got to it.
Yeah. Moving on. I asked a question earlier about kind of brave and making decisions. You had your rowing career. Then you decided to go and coach in China. Tell us about that.
I always thought I could coach. I did a little bit of coaching when I was an athlete. I did coach James Cracknell as a junior. Got him to the Junior World Championships, where he went to win a junior gold medal. I didn't think I would be rowing with him a few years later. So I always thought I could. But one of the problems I think that the British sport has over the last few decades is that the athletes are expected to train so hard that with lottery funding it does help of now. But when they get to the end is that they're not fed up with their sports, they're fed up with the time commitment they've put into it, and they want to break from that. And so going back to the 70s is that we used to have a lot of coaches that were international athletes that went into coaching, and now we don't. And so it's a different generation. So going to what John was saying a little bit earlier, is that that you learn your experiences. Throughout my career, I was lucky enough to have the 5 best coaches in the rowing in the world that have ever been. I've been coached by 2 of them. And so that's pretty special. Then you can look at it and say, well, actually you've underachieved in what you did because of the coaches that you had. And now I've gone off at a tangent. I forgot what the original question was. Bring me back
coaching
to the
in China.
Coaching in China. Thank you.
And I was chair at Henley Royal Regatta, and I was at the offices at Henley. I was driving home, and an old manager, a former Olympian himself, a guy called Athol Still, rang me up, and he said, I've been talking to the Chinese that they're looking for some coaches. Do you want to go out there? And I said, no. It takes me about 20 minutes to drive from the office at Henley to back to home. By the time that we got home, he was pretty good at trying to convince people to do things. It's pretty good from a manager's point of view. But by the time I got home, I'd agreed to go out to see them. Went out to Beijing, met up with some of the athletes, and signed a contract while I was there, and started coaching at the end of or the beginning of that season, which was 2018. I thought it was the money they were offering was life-changing for me and my family. Again, 25 years of rowing and not really earning anything, not really putting anything into a pension fund, is that I could see this being the sort of a pretty tough being away from the family for a few years, but could have this pension pot at the end of it. I thought that they would be really good at administration, and I think I could sort out the rowing side of it. Actually, the rowing side of it, they're not too bad. They're pretty committed. Their administration is awful. I was with them for 5 years. I didn't see my contract through, so I didn't get the big payoff I was hoping to. We did hit all our targets for the delayed Tokyo Games. We did win a gold medal and 2 bronze medals, which were higher than the British team, which I've got mixed of issues with that. Because
did you wear Chinese kit?
I wore Chinese kit, yes.
Ooh,
yeah.
Impressive. And so where
I didn't sing the national anthem. I can't speak Chinese.
So in 2020, where did you end up?
2020, I was offered to go out to America to coach out there when I broke the contract with China. So I wanted to go out there, but they need to change their system, is that they give out too many scholarships. So in rowing terms, we have got, Great Britain have got over 200 athletes on reduced and a lot of them on free scholarships to top universities to be able to row. American rowing, they don't really start until they go to university, and so they get to a very high level very quickly, but they don't choose their university because of their sports, where in the UK that does happen quite a lot. And so that they now go to the Junior World Championships, that all the universities, there are about 25 American universities, rowing universities that go, they pick the best talent, take them back to America. Their colleges do really well, but the American team's going down. And as a sport, we need a strong America. And if you've only got one American in your first 8, that doesn't really drive success through to the Olympic level. So because they wouldn't change their system, and John Sport, one of the suggestions I was making, we have a diversity problem within our sport as well, is that the basketball players that don't quite make it, why don't we get them to come and row? Because they're all the right levers. Rowing is a simple physics sport. Where the blade goes in the water, that is the fixed point, and you're levering the boat past that position. Us in the boat feel like we're pulling it through the water. It looks like we're pulling it through the water. If you did pull it through the water, the boat's going nowhere. So it's a simple physics thing. So that's where we tend to be quite tall. We're latching onto a bit of of diversity of changing that. The American Association wasn't interested in that scheme, and the universities weren't interested in changing a quota system. So I decided not to go to America.
Did you spend part of lockdown in China, in Wuhan?
No, nobody knew where Wuhan was. I was in Wuhan. We were on a camp out in Austin, in Texas, with the Chinese team, and one of the first people that died from COVID was one of the coaches at Wuhan. About a quarter of the team were from Wuhan. It was quite a big rowing centre from that, and the Chinese get paid a hell of a lot more money than our British athletes or any athletes in the sport of rowing. And so they did a whip round for the family, and that was the first thing I knew about COVID, and send that money back to the family. And then we went from America to Portugal. That's where the international scene got cancelled, the only place that would take us back of going back into China was Wuhan, which nobody wanted to go because it was on the map for very wrong reasons. And it's also the capital of eating duck, but they don't eat the bits that we like. It's feet and beak and neck. I never really got sort of some of the places that we go to with a whole tray of chicken's feet. I always said I'd try it before I left, and fortunately I left before I tried it.
We could have a whole conversation of strange food that we've eaten travelling around the world. That would be another one. Before I open up to the audience, I'm going to ask final question to John in terms of, dual career. You're playing in the NBA, you're studying. Okay, the question is in two parts. If you'd taken that $17 million contract for LA, do you think you'd have your career that you have now? Ooh.
Yes,
yeah,
this was always the plan, so yes.
And so...
to be with us tonight, here.
Right here.
Right here. Tell us about that transition and what you do, because actually transitioning out of sport is not that easy to do.
Yeah.
A lot of athletes really struggle to do it. So tell us about that kind of transition and some of the things that you're involved in now.
So I think this is one of the most interesting and transferable parts of sport. Much of what people think transfers from sport does not into business. But this is one of the interesting parts, because athletes and many people in specialist careers fail because their occupation becomes their definition. What they do becomes who they are. Those business analysts right now in a job 50 years old that they thought would take them through to the C-suite, and who are now being nudged and told, hey, do you want to learn coding? Once you suddenly realize if you are what you do, it's one of the most dangerous things in the world. That's why athletes crash out after their career, so many of them, and medicate themselves with sex, drugs, gambling, whatever else. It's a pattern. It's also a pattern in workplaces when especially men who build worse social networks retire. Same thing happens. You are not who you were anymore. And so for me, I never had that problem because I was never people call me a basketball player. I was never a basketball player. I was a psychologist who played basketball, if anything. But really, I was just a nerd. And that can stay with you no matter how bad your knees are. And so my transition never was. I knew I'd be a psychologist when I was 7 years old. I told my mother I would be a psychologist. I learned about I watched my mother, who's a GP. I watched her in the homes. She did a lot of work with palliative care, so families who weren't going to get better. And I watched her in these living rooms dealing with the extended family of a dying person. And I watched how it was like the air was heavy. I was 7 years old when I first saw this. The air was heavy and it was hard to breathe. I could recognize this as I went on these visits with her. And then she would be pelted with the fears of these family members. How can I cope? What are we going to do? You promised this. And I would watch her drink a cup of tea and listen. And then all of a sudden she would be like, you can do this. And I'd be like, Dr. Amaechi, you don't understand. I said, you can do this. You're going to do this and this and this, and I'll see you in a week. Tone of voice, kind face, and the air in the room would suddenly rush in. And it would be like, they can cope for another week. And somebody in the room would say, yeah, you're right, Dr. Amaechi, I'll do this, this, and this, and I'll see you in a week. And I always thought that was amazing, magic. And then 1977, for those of you who are proper nerds, you'll know that's the year that Star Wars A New Hope came out. And I went to see it with my mum.
Can I say that was my specialist subject on Mastermind? So
right.
Thank you.
Good, as it should be. And I went to see it in Gatley with my mum, and we had a shared box of popcorn. And there's a scene in the film, about 43 and a half minutes in, approximately, where Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi with the droids in the back go into Mos Eisley, and they get stopped by the stormtroopers, and I'm confused because the film should be over. And Obi-Wan waves his hand and says, these aren't the droids you're looking for. We can move along. And they repeat, these aren't the droids you're looking for, move along, move along. And I was like, I missed the rest of Star Wars the first time I watched it because I was just looking into the side of my mum's head. Because I'm like, I've seen this before in these living rooms. And so I'm looking at the side of her head, and eventually she's reaching down for popcorn, and she must have noticed, and she looks at me, and this is minutes after that scene had happened. It's like she read my mind and was just like, and I knew that my mum was a Jedi, and I knew from Star Wars that if your mum's a Jedi, you're a Jedi. And I went to the library and I asked the librarian about how I become a Jedi. And she said, the Star Wars books are over there. And I looked at her, 7 years old, and I said, you misunderstand me. And I explained what my mother did. And she said, that sounds like psychology. And that's why I'm a psychologist, because it's the closest thing to being a Jedi I could be. And that's the thing, right? If you pick an identity that endures, that will survive transformation and technology, and if you pick an identity that endures and have an attitude that is open to learning, remarkable things are possible.
I'm not sure I can top that, really. Apart from to say I once put that I was a Jedi on a census. My dad went ballistic with me. But you know what? Star Wars, first three.
It matters.
The original three, not 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to have a debate about Star Wars. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. It's been so much fun to spend time with both of you. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.